Hello, my name is Alex Sanford, and today I'm going to be talking to you about the 20 points proposal as well as the Trail of Broken Treaties. So let's go ahead and get into it here. As far as background information goes, why did the Trail of Broken Treaties happen? What led up to it? Well, in short, Native American communities all throughout the nation, they were struggling. There was poor education, a lack of good health care, as well as a lack of housing all throughout Native American communities. There was also, at the time, the concurrent civil rights movement, where activists would participate in sit-ins in the South. And Native Americans modeled fish-ins similar to the sit-ins, and this stemmed from the state of Washington not allowing Native people the right to fish in their ancestral waters. So this created a movement across the nation, and more specifically, the Pacific Northwest, where tribespeople would fish and hunt in their ancestral lands, predominantly states like Oregon, Idaho, and Washington. There was also a mass breaking of treaties, and the Smithsonian Museum estimates that 374 treaties were made between the federal government and various native tribes, almost all of which were broken by the federal government. So this shows a clear neglect from the agreements that they made. In 1968, the American Indian Movement, or AIM, was created, and shortly after, a 19-month occupation of Alcatraz followed. So this created a bit of activism in the Native American communities. This led up to the Trail of Broken Treaties. This was organized mainly by Hank Adams, Dennis Banks, and Russell Means, and this was the assemblance and mobilization of various groups to our nation's capital in Washington, D.C. They planned to leave and arrive to D.C. on the week of the presidential election to make sure that their concerns were heard by both of the presidential candidates. There were a total of 8 organizations involved, and caravans left from places like Seattle, San Francisco, Los Angeles, and then another one meeting up with the convoy from Oklahoma. On their journey, they stopped through many reservations and learned about different communities' grievances and issues that they faced on a day-to-day basis. They reconvened in St. Paul, Minnesota, and that's where they drafted the 20-point position paper. The 20-point position paper is a list of 20 demands or proposals between the natives and the federal government. The following slide will include 5 key ones. The first one being the restoration of constitutional treaty-making authority. Native Americans used to be viewed as a separate entity from the United States. Therefore, they were able to negotiate their own treaties without having someone speak on their behalf. They wanted that to be restored because that right was stripped away from them. The second point being the commission to review treaty commitments and violations. This goes back to the fish-ins example that I touched on earlier. They wanted the United States government to be held accountable for previous treaties that they made, and live up to the expectation that they would actually keep those treaties. There was also the land reform and restoration of a 110 million acre land base. This was a restoration that was promised to them throughout the years through various treaties that they would receive this land base. However, the U.S. In multiple occasions would kind of go back on itself and not live up to its end of the treaty. They also wanted to abolish the Bureau of Indian Affairs, or the BIA, by the year 1976. Vine Deloria and other activists that are like-minded to him viewed the BIA as an inefficient entity that really did not act in the best interest of Native Americans like it was supposed to. And then finally, there was the protection of Indian religious freedom and cultural identity. And in the past, Native Americans, they were forced off to boarding schools or forced assimilation, things like that. So they wanted the right to practice their own religion and to express their culture without facing the oppression that they conventionally faced. So upon their arrival to Washington, D.C., they found out that President Nixon was out of the country. Their movement meeting that was scheduled to be in Arlington Cemetery was denied by the national parks, and then meetings with the Department of Interior, Department of Labor, and Department of Commerce were all canceled last minute. Tensions led to the BIA occupation because these people that traveled thousands of miles wanted to be heard. So, again, this led to a violent skirmish between police officers and natives, which eventually led to Native Americans barricading themselves within the property of the BIA office building. This lasted to be a week long. And the results were that the media tended to focus on the damages done to the building rather than the 20 points. Nixon administration wanted to put an end to all this, so they agreed to pay for all the travel expenses to return the people back home. This totaled at about $66,000. They were also made immune from any prosecution or damages done to the BIA building. Nixon also promised a task force to consider the 20 points. Initially, they were rejected by this task force. However, it was not for nothing because some of the aspects of the 20 points were implemented in Nixon's self-determination policy later on. There also was, after this event, a large coming together and it inspired future demonstrations for Native Americans to bound together and fight as one to go ahead and get cultural recognition and Native American rights in the United States. Here are my sources for my presentation, and then here are my image sources that I used in the slides previously. Thank you very much.